TV and YouTube. This is our second stream of the night here. We are going to be watching episode 4 of the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix. I do just want to say we just finished our other stream of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob, Season 7. We watched episodes 17, 18, and 19. So Season 7 is now completed. The next time that we see anything with Joe Bob, it is going to be in October for the Halloween specials. Of course, tonight is the final night of September 30th, 2024. Hopefully you guys are doing okay, enjoying the night a little bit. We got to watch some spooky stuff. Now we're going to sit back, relax, and learn some more about Vince McMahon here in episode 4 of the Netflix documentary series, Mr. McMahon. Okay, and I do just want to apologize as well. Our last stream that we did with The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob, there were some technical difficulties, so hopefully we can avoid that in this stream and everything goes over smoothly. But I don't want to take too much of your time away, guys. I do just want to also say thank you for helping me get to 1,000 followers on Twitter, or X as the new kids call it nowadays. But that means a lot to me. Thank you so much. The next goal is 2,000. So thank you for your support. Thank you for watching the channel, checking out the channel and these videos. We're ready to get started with episode 4 here. You guys can probably see my pumpkin lights there in the background now. Added some more lights to the room. It's a little bit brighter in here now with all the lights that we added. So hopefully that helps out the darkness that was happening in the previous videos. But this next episode, with episode 4 of Mr. McMahon on Netflix, is titled Attitude. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be going into a lot of the Attitude Era with the WWF and talking about Vince McMahon during that era. So let's get right into it. The drink of choice tonight is, of course, we got some Monster Juice. This is the Rio Punch. So we are sipping on some Monster Energy, the Monster Juice here, Rio Punch. And before we get started as well, I do have to switch over to the live feed here on Twitch TV. That would definitely help us out a lot. There you go, guys. You haven't missed anything. They're still playing the intro here, so we are all okay with that. But again, we're just sipping on some Monster Energy here, Rio Punch. I definitely like this flavor. The Rio Punch and the Aussie Lemonade have definitely been bangers. So guys, let's get started. Episode 4, Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix.
Dr. Jerry Graham is not the favorite citizen in this arena.
We all have favorites as kids. My favorite was a fellow by the name of Dr. Jerry Graham. He was a doctor, obviously. A big guy, bleached blonde hair, and he would light a cigar with $100 bill.
I have never known a guy that could make as many enemies as Dr. Jerry Graham.
He was a heel in the parlance of our business. Maybe that's one reason why I liked him, I don't know. Because I never liked the good guys. I wanted to be like him so badly, I convinced my stepmother to dye my hair blonde. And I learned to strut just like he did. Yeah, he doesn't walk, he struts. So he sort of took me under his wing. You want to take a ride, kid? Or did I ever? He had his 1959 convertible. I'm riding a shotgun. He's honking the horn going through intersections, regardless if the light was green or red. And it's like, this is grand. Man, I want to live my life like this. He was just so flamboyant, so aggressive, and the hubris, and the color, and all of that. It was like, yeah, that's who I want to be.
Let me pause it for you guys because we just lost this light over here. It actually just went out, so it does that after every like 2 hours. Like I said, we just finished a 3-hour stream of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob, Season 7, Episodes 17, 18, and 19. So just had to turn that back on for you guys, but hopefully that helps out a little bit. Episode 4, Attitude. In January 2024, Vince McMahon resigned from WWE after allegations involving sexual misconduct, assault, and trafficking. The majority of the following interviews, including with Vince McMahon, were filmed before the allegations were made public.
Oh, you're kidding me. Magnus, are you going to try to beat Bret Hart with a sharpshooter? Yes, he is!
In Montreal in the Survivor Series, Bret Hart, the Hitman, is counted out by Vince McMahon and a brawl ensues afterwards. Unquestionably the most controversial bout in the history of wrestling.
The Montreal Screwjob. It just was so crazy surreal. That caused such inner turmoil within the business. The underground world, what is now the internet world, got a hold of the behind the scenes information, and that was spreading like wildfire. You're seeing the reaction by people of something they should have known nothing about.
The fans knew that Vince double-crossed Bret Hart, which was something very, very unprofessional by the rules of professional wrestling. There's two sides to every story, but most people did not side with Vince on that one.
Listen, the Montreal Screwjob to me as a Canadian, like, I fucking hated Vince.
Vince goes on television and tries to explain it. He didn't come off very well.
Bret screwed Bret. I have no sympathy whatsoever for Bret.
The Bret screwed Bret speech, that begins a moment in time where reality takes front seat to fantasy, and we begin to blur the line.
That's Vince McMahon tonight, rousing. They're booing McMahon out of the building. Yeah, what's going on?
As a result of all this, I have all this heat, as we call it.
I wonder if somebody's gonna knock the bejesus out of Vince McMahon this week.
And so I thought, okay, Vince, why not turn that into business? Use now you as a character.
Vince has not endeared himself to this crowd.
I always wanted to be a performer, but my dad wouldn't let me into business, much less that. He just thought, no, that's not what you want to do. And I was like, yeah, that's what I really want to do. When it happened, it felt pretty natural.
We just show a little respect. At that point in time, Vince McMahon creates the Mr. McMahon character, the evil tyrant boss, and eventually that would change the trajectory of the business.
Let's talk about the business and the challenge that you have received from WCW. If I look at cable listings for January in 1 week, WCW is number 1, number 2, number 4, and number 6. You're down to number 18.
Through 97, WCW, they were just so far ahead, and their product was better. So I'm just thinking, that's like, this is just a domination, and it's going to be like this for the foreseeable future.
And I think once Bret Hart made the transition and came over to WCW, I think if you were to put the rosters side by side on a piece of paper, WCW was in a much better position than WWE was. I wanted to dominate and win. You know, if WWE went out of business in the process, that would have been unfortunate, but I wouldn't have felt bad about it.
What is this? What a piece of work this guy is. Oh, there it is. What is it?
For years, we were kind of stuck in that really young demographic, whereas from WCW, they were hitting that 18 to 34-year-old demographic with some really cutting-edge stuff. 83 weeks of getting our tails kicked in the ratings, it messes with your confidence, it messes with your psyche, but it also lets you know that you got to do something different. I knew if we didn't change, we'd just get left behind.
You're dealing with networks, and you're dealing with people in the networks that are looking at you going, hey, These guys are beating you in the ratings, and I see our talent on their show. What's going on here, guys?
You listen to the audience, and you sort of feel it. It's time for a change. It was time for us to take another step and evolve.
When I started working with Vince, it was absolute war between the two franchises.
It'll be me and you, McMahon, in the ring.
Vince decided that he wanted to be known for pushing the envelope, for being bold, being a little crazy.
Vince came out and did an interview about this new way of producing WWE programming.
We in the WWF think that you, the audience, are quite frankly tired of having your intelligence insulted.
Vince kind of teased all this newness that was coming down the road. And I thought, yeah, whatever. You know.
So obviously in 1997, it is the dawn of a new era in the WWF, because that is the beginning in the year 1997 to the Attitude Era. And of course, that was obviously in response to the Monday Night Wars against WCW.
You're going to come out with another version of Doink the Clown and some evil dentist, and you're going to keep doing what you're doing. I didn't know that Vince was making the decision to create the Attitude Era.
Was there a distinctive moment when the Attitude Era was born?
Yeah, there was. One night, Vince was not at a television taping, and Shawn Michaels came down in bicycle shorts, and right before he went out, he stuffed the front of his shorts with a sock.
It was gauze, wasn't a sock. It was gauze that I'd wadded up from the trainer table. And I was just, bouncing around, gyrating and stuff like that. Vince's reaction was to call me the next day and tell me how unprofessional it was and that he was fining me $10,000. And I said, okay, but you go back and watch that and tell me if that isn't funny. If we're talking about entertainment, it was very entertaining. That was one of the things that got us into the conversations of, we need to start going there. I felt like you can have respect for this line of work, but you don't have to act like it's freaking not weird. Suffice to say, I weaseled my way out of the $10,000 fine.
Vince was livid, but then 3 or 4 weeks later, remember Vince pointed to Shawn Michaels. That's attitude. That's what he says. He's got attitude. We need more attitude. The Attitude Era was born. The Attitude Era was just this transformation that took place. We changed how we presented our product. We got a little grittier, we got a little dirtier, we made it a little more raw.
People just go, oh, the Attitude Era. Here's where it started. Here's what it is. It was slowly bits and pieces over time. We are the Generation X. You make the rules, and we will bring them.
Generation X is what we would call in sports and entertainment a faction. They were an offshoot of the clique. They were anti-authority. And there's something about anti-authority at this time that really spoke to fans. And whether it was part of the fiction or completely real, you didn't know.
This is going into the next thing.
But you couldn't turn away.
When Sean and I started doing DX, man, most of the things we were saying and doing, Vince was coming back and telling us, God damn, you guys do that again and you're going to get fucked like him. USA's threatening to take us off the air. But we're like coming in the back and people are going crazy. And then there's a flip moment in time where all of a sudden it's, hey, that worked. Do that again.
Oh my gosh!
We just finally changed the writing to where it wasn't for a 12-year-old demographic. It got into that 18 to 34-year-old male demographic.
Once that door was opened, I marched right through it because it was working.
It was all about filling up those arenas and stadiums, and it was just like we could do whatever we got to do to be the best.
The biggest star of the Attitude Era by far was Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Anytime you stick your head in the ring with Steve Austin, Bottom line is, I'm going to kick your ass. Straight simple.
He was something that we weren't used to seeing. This kind of foul-mouthed, roughneck, blue-collar Southern badass.
When I first got into the business of professional wrestling, I never had any designs on being as successful as I would be because I didn't know how far some ragamuffin from Victoria, Texas could take it.
Prior to WWE, Steve Austin was a wrestler in WCW, but he got fired from WCW, so he winds up in ECW, which is sort of the punk rock indie federation in the pro wrestling world.
And walking in.
So here right now they're talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin. And obviously, I've talked about it many times before, how WCW made mistakes in the talent that they would push on the main roster. Now, WCW, a long time ago, they had guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, who they fired because they didn't see any future business in them. They didn't think that they would become superstars in pro wrestling. So, Stone Cold Steve Austin, he gets fired from WCW, ends up in Paul Heyman's ECW. And at this time, ECW is Extreme Championship Wrestling. It's the ECW that we know and love, that I know and love. ECW, one of my favorite promotions of all time. And this is where Stone Cold starts to work more on the character of Stone Cold. This is where Steve Austin pretty much starts developing the character of Stone Cold. And then by the time he gets to the WWF, they really didn't know what to do with him just yet when he got to the WWF. I believe once he debuted, he was actually the ringmaster and he worked a lot with Ted DiBiase. But throughout time, once the Attitude Era finally kicked in the WWF and they were at war with WCW, Steve Austin got to really showcase that Stone Cold personality and the Stone Cold character.
To that federation, man, it was an eye-opener and a hell of a scene.
This is extreme! This is the ECW arena!
ECW was the necessary disruption of the pro wrestling / sports entertainment industry. No rules, no regulations, a testosterone and adrenaline-driven, no holds barred, this can't possibly be legal, what the fuck am I watching atmosphere? It was a mosh pit. ECW was a wild-ass, renegade-type promotion that attracted that niche audience. It was very unusual. I greatly appreciated the promotion and the promoter behind it.
Now here Vince McMahon is talking about his respect and his appreciation for the ECW as a brand. Even though, like Paul Heyman said, they pretty much threw everything against the wall just to see if it would stick. You know, anything that couldn't be shown on cable network TV at the time is pretty much what ECW was doing. And if you were somebody who liked hardcore wrestling like a Mick Foley, you could have got a job at ECW, working for pennies, obviously, but you still could have became an independent wrestler on their circuit. A lot of people like to consider that Vince McMahon took a lot of inspiration and a lot of ideas from Paul Heyman and ECW to create the Attitude Era in the WWF. And then you have moments in WWF, especially around like 96 into that early 97. They pretty much would work hand in hand with ECW for a lot of shows. With now, it might be considered normal, but back then, you know, ECW was still an independent promotion. They had like no budget. They had no support from cable network television. So to get an opportunity to work with the big dog in the house and to work with a conglomerate that is WWF, I mean, even though they're still losing the war to WCW at this time, even just to have that opportunity in Paul Heyman's eyes to put his talent, you know, to showcase them and to kind of get more eyes on his brand, that had to be a very great opportunity for ECW. And then, like I said, Vince McMahon had respect for the ECW brand and Paul Heyman, even though it was a completely different style of wrestling, right? The hardcore style, the extreme style. but they became partners down the line. And a lot of what ECW was doing most likely inspired the Attitude Era in the WWF around 97 moving forward.
There ain't a mofo organization in the world today like ECW! Vince always saw everyone else as a feeder system to the major leagues of WWE. So I knew we didn't have Steve for a long time. But we were going to make it quality time for every moment that he was in ECW.
We achieved a lot of success in a short time, and finally Vince took serious notice of me, and that's when I would go to WWE.
Stone Cold Steve Austin. I love him, McMahon.
So I turned into Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I became this just trash talking SOB from South Texas, and it became very entertaining, and people started disliking me. We started gaining traction. Now, at that time, everybody knows that Triple H was supposed to win that King of the Ring pay-per-view. But then Triple H got punished because of what happened in the Garden. And I hear his voice behind me, it's Vince. He goes, "Hey, Steve, you got a second?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so, you're the boss." He says, "Hey, I just want to let you know in 2 weeks you're going to win King of the Ring." So we get to the King of the Ring pay-per-view. I'm wrestling Mark Merrill first. We do a move, he kicks me in the mouth, and busts my lip wide open. I've got to go to the hospital immediately and get 14 stitches. As soon as I come back from the ambulance, Michael Hayes comes up to me and goes, "Hey man, you got Jake the Snake Roberts in the finals, and Jake just cut a religious promo on you.
The power above is reaching down and lifting me up."
And immediately I thought of Austin 316, because back in the day you watch football games, they would put John 316 signs in the end zone. We go out there, work the match with Jake. I go up to the microphone, and man, I just went out there and started running Jake down.
You sit there and you thump your Bible and you say your prayers, and it didn't get you anywhere. Talk about your Psalms, talk about John 3:16. Austin 3:16 says I just whipped your ass.
And when Steve said that, I went, "Oh my God, tell me he didn't just do that. That may not play too well, in the Bible Belt."
That's all.
And then I kept talking and kept talking, and I could hear Vince in the background because he was doing the commentary, and I said, "Oh man, I need a button on this promo." And so just out of the blue, I said, "And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so."
It was brilliant. It changed who he was and perception of who he was as a character.
Next night, everywhere you looked were Austin 316 signs. Austin 316 took over, and it was insane.
When the Monday Night War started and we kept losing in the ratings, for a while we understood it because they had a really hot show. It was really fresh, and they had a lot of great talent down there and some cool storylines. But as we started to ramp up, we really thought we had a better show. We're like, man, what is up with these ratings? Someone's got to be paying somebody off. We got a better show than they do.
At that point in time, I remember this, like, we need to do something here. We need a way to get a lot of eyeballs on us and do something in a really big way for WrestleMania. And that's what we did.
At this time, I would like to introduce to you a man who is simply...
Now, this is January 1998. So, obviously, the Attitude Era in the WWF is starting to kick into the next gear, right? They're developing a lot of their characters around more of that attitude personality. Stone Cold is pretty much the hottest star in the WWF at this time, amongst many others. You had Kane. Well, Kane didn't actually debut until the Hell in a Cell match that The Undertaker had. I believe it was against Shawn Michaels. But you had so many assets to the Attitude Era. I mean, there was Stone Cold, there was The Rock, who transitioned from Rocky Maivia. There was Mankind, Mick Foley, who they actually say won the Monday Night Wars for the WWF, because after The Undertaker threw Mankind off the Hell in a Cell, that was pretty much the nail in the coffin for WCW. Nobody in WCW was as crazy as Mick Foley, so WWF had a victory in that term. Also, you had characters that were starting to get into more of that attitude personality, like D-Generation X, Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Now, obviously, Shawn Michaels' career does take a little bit of a left turn because he ends up getting injured. So Triple H has to recruit new members into D-Generation X, if you will, because he didn't want the group to die. He didn't want D-Generation X to just like fall flat on their face and die. So once Shawn Michaels gets injured, Triple H then recruits more members into the group, which include Road Dogg, Badass Billy Gunn, Chyna, of course, X-Pac, who X-Pac had a lot of go-away heat. It's unfortunate. But around this time in wrestling, heat was very much a real thing. Vince McMahon had heat on himself, as well, as he stated at the beginning of the episode, just because of what he did to Bret Hart in Montreal at Survivor Series. So right here, around 97, right, the later terms of 97, kind of like late 97 into 98, now we're starting to really pick up with the Attitude Era. And soon enough, the WWF is really going to start fucking competing with the WCW in the Monday Night Wars.
The baddest man on the planet, ladies and gentlemen, Iron Mike Tyson.
I got a phone call. Eric, you're never going to believe what they're doing next. I'm thinking, yeah, whatever. I was so far out ahead of them at that point. I was like, yeah, whatever. I was arrogant. Because they're bringing in Mike Tyson. I got uncocky real fast.
The idea for bringing in Mike Tyson came from Vince, and Shane McMahon was heavily involved.
Wanted a big personality, someone extremely identifiable to be a part of WrestleMania, and there was at that time no one bigger than Tyson. I believe he had gotten out of jail for about 3 years earlier.
Knowing Mike Tyson's baggage during the 90s, was it risky for WWE to so fully invest in him?
He hadn't been arrested for rape yet, though, when we did that, right? He had?
Yeah.
Mike is not perhaps universally approved of now, but his public image is certainly in a better place than it was at that point.
Wrestling at that level is about generating heat. Heat is what sells tickets. And heat doesn't have to be positive. Heat can be negative.
Specifically, I would like to thank Mike Tyson, being the media magnet that he is.
Tyson being on pay-per-view was a big deal. Mike would be the special guest referee between Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels.
It's Mike Tyson, like one of the biggest names in sports. And by then, you had to blind not to see Steve Austin was taken off.
Mike, I'll tell you this. If you get in my face at WrestleMania, I'll knock your damn lights out, and you won't want to get back in the ring ever again.
So now, of course, January 1998, they're starting to go on the road to WrestleMania for WrestleMania season. They're talking about WrestleMania 14 in 1998, of course. And at this time, Stone Cold is still very much anti-hero. He's still very much playing the heel character. The rivalry between Stone Cold and The Rock hasn't really started yet. But Shawn Michaels, I think at WrestleMania 14, Shawn Michaels actually wrestles the match with damn near a broken back. Wrestles the entire match against Stone Cold in the main event, has to put up with the injury. And pretty much once Shawn Michaels loses the title to Stone Cold at WrestleMania 14, that absolutely sends Stone Cold into the sky like a rocket on fire. Okay? Because Shawn Michaels, like I said, he pretty much wrestled in the main event at WrestleMania 14 against Stone Cold with a broken back, dealing with the injury. Amazing match. Still, if you guys go back and watch it to this day, it still holds up to this day. But after the match, Shawn Michaels does have to get surgery done, and he does have to kind of take care of his injuries. So like I said, that's where Triple H starts recruiting new members for D-Generation X. Shawn Michaels isn't really around anymore at that point in time. And now that's where you start to see Stone Cold really propel himself to the next level. And of course, since Stone Cold pretty much becomes the anti-hero in the WWF for the Attitude Era, the only other bigger star that was in that kind of same ranking and that same path as him was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So after the match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14, 1998, Mike Tyson is the special guest referee. There was that whole thing in the match where like Mike Tyson was wearing a D-Generation X shirt and then he rips it off and shit. So pretty much Stone Cold becomes still like an anti-hero, but more of like a loved hero, more of the good guy. And then The Rock pretty much starts really taking over as the heel of the company.
And that's the bottom line. At that point, I thought that WCW, while still ahead, is going to get very, very competitive.
It don't get no bigger than this. This is what our business is all about. It's about earning the opportunity to wrestle in the main event at a WrestleMania.
WrestleMania 14, Shawn had a real bad back, and so that match was very forgettable.
There's no for another tip. Austin, he got it.
Very fast count for Mike Tyson on the pinfall.
It wasn't anything to brag about. I remember afterwards, I looked over at Vince and he goes, Steve, don't worry about it. From here forward, it starts.
I would like to congratulate the new World Wrestling Federation champion, who has an attitude, no doubt about that. Not one necessarily that all of us here in the WWF necessarily appreciate.
The Mr. McMahon character, at least in my mind, became a real thing after the Mike Tyson storyline played itself out.
Hey Vince, are you turning into a bad guy?
I've always been a good guy.
But they're booing you. They're booing you now.
Always be a good guy.
As the owner of the WWF, Vince McMahon makes his way to the ring. Quite honestly, not the most rousing ovation.
At that point in time, a feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin would ignite and would start a battle between those two that would change the course of the business. Nobody, especially Vince McMahon, tells Stone Cold Steve Austin what to do, and that's the bottom line. But all of that based on blurring the lines of reality and fiction. You got to understand the power that a Vince McMahon has, the control.
You've got the eccentric billionaire boss, Vince McMahon, and then you've got the anti-system Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they were perfect for each other.
I will fire your ass.
Good God.
It was about a guy who was trying to keep me down and control me, and it's about me trying to buck the system.
You stupid bastards, you ain't got the balls to fire Stone Cold Steve Austin.
In any other era, I'm a heel because of what I'm doing, the trash I'm talking.
You're pathetic. You're completely pathetic.
But I was the guy that brought the gray area to the business of professional wrestling, which is you.
Now, one thing I do want to talk about too, very quickly, obviously this is more of the topic of Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon. It's fucking Vince McMahon's own documentary here on Netflix, so they might not talk about too much of the rivalry with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. But like I said, after WrestleMania 14, the next WrestleMania is WrestleMania 15, where the main event is Stone Cold versus The Rock. And that's where the rivalry sort of starts for them. What I do want to talk about is how Stone Cold, once he does decide to fully turn heel, here's what happens, okay? So I believe it was WrestleMania 17. So now if you look at WrestleMania 15, that was the first match in the main event between Stone Cold and The Rock at WrestleMania. So WrestleMania 15. WrestleMania 17, they had their next match against each other, which I believe would have been in like 2001. So people kind of consider 2001 the end of the Attitude Era because Stone Cold, at the end of the match, he joins forces with Vince McMahon. Now, what they're talking about here is the relationship that Vince McMahon and Stone Cold had against each other. But at WrestleMania 17, after defeating The Rock, Stone Cold decides to turn heel technically and join forces with Vince McMahon, which absolutely shattered the Attitude Era. People always consider that the end of the Attitude Era because Stone Cold was always the enemy to Vince McMahon. They were never supposed to be friends. And that's where things start to change up a little bit for the WWF as well. I believe in 2002, they had to drop WWF and become WWE fully. But once Stone Cold does decide to kind of turn heel and finally join forces with Vince McMahon, that is the end of the Attitude Era. Right there, that night that happened. Because one, like I said, people did not want to see Stone Cold and Vince McMahon on the same team technically. And two, Stone Cold was better being the anti-hero, okay? Once he kind of started doing the heel gimmick and being more of a heel character, it wasn't the same Stone Cold. He would tell more like jokes and just try to be funny, show a little bit more of his personality, but it was completely far-sighted from the Stone Cold Steve Austin that we all know and love. And obviously, Stone Cold has even talked about it in interviews too. He based the character of Stone Cold Steve Austin off of a real-life serial killer. So whatever he was doing as a heel around like 2001 and then moving forward, it just did not match to what people had already knew and loved about Stone Cold. Like, we recently talked about how it was major success for the WCW once they decided to turn Hulk Hogan heel and he became Hollywood Hulk Hogan. There was no more Hulkamania. There was no more red and yellow. That was a major success for the WCW. It did not work the same way for Stone Cold Steve Austin. Completely different character, completely different personality. And like I said, once he started kind of being on the same team with Vince McMahon, people, the fans, WWE fans, they did not like that. And that is officially the end to the Attitude Era in 2001.
Usually a black and white type thing as far as love and hate.
WrestleMania 17, the second match between Stone Cold and The Rock in a WrestleMania main event. WrestleMania 17, 2001, Stone Cold Steve Austin turns heel technically, and that is the end of the Attitude Era.
See, my day, there was a good guy and a bad guy. Vince Jr. made it the bad and the worst. There were no more good guys in wrestling.
Society at that time had taken a rougher edge. Society at that time had more attitude. That forced you to create characters that fit into that gray area in the middle.
The fans did not want to see good guys no more. Nobody want to see a good guy, even in the movies. Look at the video games and the wrestling business. We cater to what is in front of us. You tap into that. That's big money. So Vince said, hey, give me some of that money.
We don't always set trends, we try to follow them. And back in those days, it was Wild West.
Stone Cold Steve Austin, who is as crude as he is mean, and he's just about the biggest thing in wrestling, worshipped by his fans.
It feels like smashing a beer bottle, he doesn't. It feels like throwing up his middle finger, he doesn't.
Some part of us really loves watching the bad guys get over. Maybe the part of us that doesn't like the fact that we have to behave ourselves. You can't go around shoving people. You can't go around insulting people.
People live vicariously through those kind of storylines, and we love to punch your boss in the mouth. I got a chance to literally and figuratively do that almost every Monday night on Raw. I think the fans responded strongly because he's such a strong character. He's just so over the top. He's larger than life. He's easy to hate. He's also easy to love, and he's very easy to hate.
Mr. McMahon, he's at the top.
So any and everybody that's not at the top hates the guy at the top.
You know, he's got an entire collection of Corvettes.
Vince walks by with his custom suits and his flaunting and everything. What's to like? He's easy to hate.
Get that mic out of my face. It's my mic. I own that mic. I own that camera. Cut it off.
And he became the most hated character in the history of the business.
Mr. McMahon, of course, is a character derived from Vince McMahon, and it's a character of someone I could relate to when I was growing up. Because when I was growing up, I was like dirt poor. Coming from that environment, I don't like rich people because I was around some people who thought they were better than me because they had, quote, more money. So it felt like you weren't anybody at all. You were nobody. And you learn certain things. In those days, I could fight and love to fight. If you do that well, now you're somebody. I was good at fighting, but they would say, you didn't fight fair. You cheated. Yeah, I won.
What the hell's the matter with you?
And so, with my character, Mr. McMahon, I can play someone who intimidates because that was the way I grew up. That was the way I thought rich people were. They were trying to intimidate you.
You're gonna get it.
I don't know how to be an arrogant person that just like throws his weight around and a bully and that sort of stuff.
It's not my fault that I happen to be a self-made billionaire.
It was easy for me to get into that character because I knew all the things that I disliked.
Some people are rich and you're not.
He knows how to manipulate a crowd as well or better than anybody that's ever done it.
Well, I'm a real Texan now.
I love heat, as we call it. You go out and you manipulate the audience, and they boo the hell out of you, and you really want to get that heat and feel it. We're not afraid of it. It's like go embrace it.
This is what I think of Texas.
Such a great feeling.
Vince was a master of making people care or making people hate him or feel emotion. Emotions are when you sell tickets.
It's emotion. If you mash that button so they get emotion from people, they forget where they are. They're not.
So again, now we're talking about heat and how Vince McMahon kind of got himself over as a hated character. And like I try to tell wrestling fans all the time, okay, cheering is a good thing. Booing is actually a good thing in terms of pro wrestling, especially when you can get heat on yourself and make the people kind of hate you in a way. But there's also go away heat, okay? We've seen it many times. Go away heat is when people hate you so much, they don't want to see a fucking match. They don't want to watch you cut promos. They don't want anything to do with you in pro wrestling. It's happened many times. X-Pac had go away heat. Ronda Rousey had go away heat more recently. And I also kind of have go away heat with Logan Paul. I absolutely hate fucking Logan Paul in WWE. Don't think that they should be doing any kind of business with him or putting money in his pockets. Apparently, Logan Paul is putting money in their pockets, though, so of course they're going to keep him around. But the thing is, in pro wrestling, cheering for somebody is good. Booing for somebody is good, especially when they have tons of heat on them and you can make them kind of a hated character. The thing that is not good is when the wrestler and the performer get absolutely no reaction at all. Okay, when you go out there, they don't fucking boo you, they don't cheer you, they don't do a damn thing. That's when your career is pretty much going nowhere fast. Vince McMahon, once he started his rivalry with Stone Cold Steve Austin, it put so much heat on him too, because this is kind of technically right after the Montreal Screwjob. So now that's when he starts working the character a little bit more and gets it over in the rivalry with Stone Cold. But everywhere that Vince McMahon goes, he's pretty much the most hated person in the building.
A movie theater, not an arena. They're right there looking at you. It's one-on-one. That's what you know you have. Performing is easy. Being yourself is the more difficult part.
And what similarities do you share with Mr. McMahon?
Character Mr. McMahon with me?
Yeah.
None whatsoever. Mr. McMahon is an extension of Vince McMahon, but blown way out of proportion.
The difference between Mr. McMahon and Vince McMahon, probably not that much.
Exactly the same person. It's not a far stretch.
The character of Mr. McMahon is really just Vince. He'll tell you different. No, Mr. McMahon is Vince. A lot of the promos and the diatribes that have been cut on other people, I've had actually cut on me in real life. I'd never say that. I said, yeah, you would. You said it to me.
Bruce claimed that he's been on the receiving end of the Mr. McMahon in real life.
I'm very, very passionate about our business. And sometimes that passion is a bit effusive. So I probably can get out of balance a little bit.
The Mr. McMahon character is pretty close to Vince the Man, but obviously highly exaggerated. The best characters in wrestling are guys at their core with the volume turned up. What you saw from me as Stone Cold was me with the volume turned up. Same with Vince.
Much of great fiction is that funny line between reality and storytelling. Vince loved blurring that line between fact and fiction.
A lot of people have confused through the years, who my character was on television and who I am. It used to bug the hell out of me. I'm not that guy. And I realized it doesn't matter what you want, Vince. It doesn't matter how you want to be perceived. It's the way you are being perceived. Your perception is reality. You can't change the way people think about you.
The double bird! Pure hatred driving Mr. McMahon!
Austin McMahon, that dynamic was just ridiculously good. You could make a great argument it's the greatest feud in wrestling history.
The rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin and Stone Cold versus Mr. McMahon is what generated the huge amount of ratings for WWE that essentially ended the 83 weeks of WCW beating them in the ratings, and ultimately, like a tsunami, overtook the wrestling business, period. It was the hottest thing in the world.
I say this and I know it's going to sound like I'm putting myself over and I'm being an arrogant prick, but Vince took our formula, decided he was going to do it, only he was going to do it better. And he did. There were so many things that we did in WCW that WWE eventually replicated. DX was nothing more than a derivative of the NWO. The Mr. McMahon character was a derivative of evil Eric Bischoff. It was the evil boss. Come on, Vince, you gotta admit, you ripped me off on that one. So Eric Bischoff saying himself that he feels like a lot of the ideas that WWF had going for them, and the reason they actually beat them in ratings is because all WWF had to do was play the copycat card against WCW. Okay, Eric Bischoff, in his mind, D-Generation X is just another representation of the NWO. I personally disagree because not every single wrestler on the roster in WWF was trying to join the D-Generation X group like they were doing in the WCW with NWO. And maybe Vince McMahon is a little bit of a copycat of the evil boss, Eric Bischoff. But then again, in WCW, Eric Bischoff was on the same team as Hollywood Hulk Hogan and the NWO. He joined their team. So I don't really see a lot of similarities between the two, because for me, I'll say this, okay? D-Generation X was its own thing. All the members from the original NWO, technically, like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, they were members of the Clique. Shawn Michaels and Triple H were members of the Clique. D-Generation X is its own thing. NWO is its own thing. It got to the point in WCW where they pretty much had NWO versus somebody in a fucking squash match. Okay, and the NWO was going to win and most likely put the person they were in the ring against out of a career. D-Generation X never did that to anybody. D-Generation X was a very small group of guys who just wanted to create D-Generation X and keep it alive. Especially, like I said, during the time when Shawn Michaels was absent because he was dealing with injuries. Now, of course, later on, D-Generation X came back
with the original two members, Shawn Michaels and Triple H. That was more around 2006 and 2007. I was there for that too. I did get to even watch D-Generation X perform some matches here in Buffalo. I remember when they had the rivalry against Legacy and Randy Orton. But for me, Vince McMahon, the character that he was creating and what he was doing with the WWF is completely different than, like I said, what Eric Bischoff was doing in the WCW. Eric Bischoff was on the same team as the NWO and Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Vince McMahon was not technically on the same team with Stone Cold. They were always enemies. They were always rivals. Until, of course, WrestleMania 17, when they decided to turn Stone Cold Steve Austin technically heel and literally destroy the hopes and dreams of all the wrestling fans watching that night at WrestleMania 17, because that is the end of the Attitude Era as we know it. So I can't really agree with Eric Bischoff on that statement saying that WWE took a lot of things from WCW, because if you look at the compare and contrast, they're completely different, okay? And that's kind of why WWF started to beat them in the ratings, because people wanted to see Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon and The Rock. They wanted to see matches like Undertaker versus Kane. Obviously, what they were doing in the tag team division was fucking miles ahead of what WCW was doing. What I also did want to add is I've always kind of said how, like, it's funny to me how I'll say nowadays that WWE kind of has their own version of the NWO. If you look at the original Bloodline with Roman Reigns and the Usos, that to me is like their version of the NWO. It became one of these greatest hits for the WWE, and Roman Reigns and the Usos technically to me remind me a lot of the NWO, at least in terms of popularity. And then if you look at Solo Sikoa, the Tonga Twins, and Jacob Fatu, that to me is pretty much like NWO Wolfpack. So it's almost like they took both versions of the NWO, the original black and white, and then NWO Wolfpack. NWO black and white in WWE to me is technically a modern day version of Roman and the Usos. And then NWO Wolfpack is pretty much Solo Sikoa, the Tonga Twins, and Jacob Fatu in WWE now. So in a way, those definitely have similarities to me, but I can't agree that D-Generation X is pretty much a copycatted version of the NWO.
And you did it better. But come on, who did it first? If Eric Bischoff thinks that he played the heel character before I did, okay, if that were the case, he sure as hell didn't play it as well. So, good for him. WWE was going to win inevitably. Vince McMahon, being the competitor he is, the fighter that he is, would have done whatever he had to do to ultimately win that fight. And I was coming up short. I was not focused on creative. The NWO angle was a couple years old now. It wasn't fresh anymore. Things that were going on in WWE with Mr. McMahon and Steve Austin and others was new, was fresh, which caused the audience to shift over and check out what they were doing.
Eric's big mistake was thinking because I'm ahead, all I got to do is go with these guys and I'll always be ahead. And wrestling, everyone's got a shelf life, and you always have to make new stars. And Vince was trying to make new stars because he had to. And that's the bottom line. And Vince got very lucky. Austin was an incredible success. And then Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson comes.
You smell what The Rock is.
Great to welcome to the show one of the fastest rises to the top in the history of wrestling, The Rock. Let's start off.
Now, one thing I do want to add just before we continue forward here, about 24 minutes left in this episode, so around 24 minutes still remaining in the stream as well. But what I do want to add is that The Rock and Stone Cold did not have very long wrestling careers. And that is something that kind of hurt the WWE as well. Now imagine, I believe both Stone Cold and The Rock got around the WWE around like 96. Both of them pretty much had a final match together, WrestleMania 19, 2003. The third time they've actually wrestled in a main event at WrestleMania. But that is pretty much their final goodbye for the time being at WrestleMania 19. And it's sad to say, because if you look at it from like 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, they were only around for about 6 and 7 years in the height of their popularity. Now, obviously, Stone Cold wanted to stop wrestling because of injuries. His body just could not fucking handle it anymore. He couldn't keep up with the schedule, and it was just getting to be too much on his body. The Rock went a different direction with movies and doing Hollywood stuff. He thought that would be best for his career. People told him he was fucking stupid for leaving the company at the height of his career, but it worked out in the end because obviously now you see how successful The Rock is in Hollywood and with movies. But their pro wrestling career was not the longest. Okay, nowadays, maybe some of our favorite wrestlers, even John Cena has had a career over 10 years, even over a decade. The Undertaker, one of the longest wrestling careers in pro history, in pro wrestling of all time, of all history. But to be at the height of popularity for only about 6-7 years is not a long time in pro wrestling, okay? And this kind of, after Stone Cold and The Rock finally do step away from the company for a little bit, it forced him to obviously move into the next direction. So who was going to be the next stars? Guys like Brock Lesnar, John Cena, Randy Orton, Batista. Triple H had a really great run around like 2000, even 2001, but more mainly like 2002, 2003, even going into 2004, and still a little bit of 05. But 05 is technically what they consider the main years of kind of pushing the future of John Cena and Batista and Randy Orton, guys like that. So like I said, after about 2003, the company had to move into a different direction because Stone Cold and The Rock were pretty much out the door after that.
For a bit of your history, when you broke in, you were packaged as a part of a wrestling legacy.
My grandfather was High Chief Peter Maivia. He was in many ways responsible for putting the island of Samoa and Samoan athletes on the map.
From the Isle of Samoa, High Chief Peter Maivia.
My grandfather wrestled for Vince McMahon Sr., and then in the 80s, my dad came along, Rocky Soulman Johnson, and along with Tony Atlas became the first black tag team champions.
Rock, everything he do is just like his father. Walk like his father, wrestle like his father. You didn't know nobody. You think that Rocky Johnson.
I remember meeting Vince McMahon Jr. when I was 11 years old. Looked down at me, good to meet you. Gave me a great firm handshake, looked me in the eye. I'll never forget it.
Here we go. Well, the newcomer who's really made a name for himself as of late. We're talking about Rocky Maivia.
When he came in, we really promoted him as this third generation guy that you're going to love.
This guy is going to be phenomenal. The first third generation superstar ever.
Now, it's interesting how the tables kind of turn here because obviously once Steve Austin starts really kicking into the next gear with the Stone Cold character, he's mainly hated, right? He's mainly got a lot of heat on him for being a bad guy. He's booked as the bad guy, especially in the late like 96, 97 kind of era. Now, once they have The Rock, once they have Dwayne The Rock Johnson was a good guy. He was Rocky Maivia. He was the third generation superstar. So Stone Cold, even at the start of their career, Stone Cold was like the bad guy and The Rock was the good guy. Now, here's the interesting thing, okay? Once The Rock creates the Rock character, so we'll say Dwayne Johnson, once Dwayne Johnson creates the character of The Rock, he does so because people hated Rocky Maivia. They hated seeing The Rock as a good guy. They didn't like it at all. They didn't like how he was just all smiles and sunshine. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would lose a match and he would still be all smiles about it. Like, it's okay, you know, I'll get him next time. You always got to pat yourself on the back and try harder next time. That was not working with these fans at the time. So here's sort of what happens around like late 97, pretty much 98, full Attitude Era. Stone Cold becomes the anti-hero. He becomes the good guy of the company. He becomes the face of the company. The Rock becomes The Rock. Obviously was a member of Nation of Domination as well. But he then takes the role of being the bad guy in this scenario. So Stone Cold plays the hero and The Rock is the villain, okay? So it's interesting how they had that little bit of a switch down their careers a little bit down the line. But Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson created the character The Rock because people hated Rocky Maivia. They did not like Rocky Maivia. So thus for, The Rock was born as a heel.
We shoved them down their throats.
You hear they chant Rocky sucks.
They hated him. A lot of our audience, I think, thought that this person was just like handed this opportunity. And no matter how hard Dwayne worked in the ring, initially people started pulling him.
I'm sick of hearing about the Rocky Maivia's old man. Who cares?
The fans hated The Rock because WWE told us to love The Rock. And it took The Rock turning heel and acknowledging that the fans were booing him for the fans to start to love him.
The Nation of Domination was a faction that was based on pride in being of color and not being held down by the man.
The newest member of the Nation of Domination, Rocky Maivia.
I talked to Vince and I said, I would just love the opportunity to speak on why I'm joining the Nation. And he said, you got it.
I got 3 words. Die, Rocky, die. That's the gratitude I get from you pieces of crap.
And I said, it's not a black thing, it's not a white thing. It's a respect thing, it's about me kicking your ass thing.
This isn't about the color of my skin. This is about respect.
You know, sometimes in our lives we find these moments where there's a shift and a click, and you go, man, there is some real power behind that.
Well, Rocky Maivia is a lot of things, but sucks isn't one of them.
And boom, just like that, within a month, I became the hottest heel in the company.
If you smell what the Rock is cooking.
I remember having a conversation with Vince and him saying, I'm going to make you WWE champion. I said, you know, this is a really big deal. I said, I'm the first WWE champion of color. He said, I know. And he goes, but I don't see that. Vince, and I know this for sure, he was always about, I don't care what color you are. You could be black and green and purple. You could be a unicorn for all I give a shit. As long as you are drawing money, you will be champion.
See, it ain't got nothing to do with color. It's not racism. It's business. He don't see black. He don't see white. He see only green.
For people who knew WWE at that time, the Attitude Era, it was a unique and special time because it truly was whatever you can imagine, we can do. And we did. The Attitude Era, man, it was a movement.
So I do just want to add very quickly, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin have their first main event at WrestleMania for WrestleMania 15, which is in 1999. The second time they have a main event against each other at WrestleMania is WrestleMania X7, WrestleMania 17. That is in 2001. And the final time that they had a match, the third time they had a match in a main event at WrestleMania, is at WrestleMania 19 in 2003.
Where you went, you saw Austin 316. You saw DX.
Suck it, man!
You saw The Rock. Everybody was in on it.
They were so popular. Their merchandise was everywhere. The influence was all over the culture.
You invited The Rock to speak at the Republican National Convention?
Please welcome the one, the only, Triple H.
For a lot of us in the Attitude Era, we went from being like, yeah, I'm a dude on TV that people recognize occasionally to, you can't go anywhere. It was getting out of control.
They're making way more money now than they did then. But, I mean, as far as actual real popularity, that was the peak.
It's the entertainment phenomenon of the 90s, a billion-dollar industry worldwide, a TV ratings smash, a sport of sorts that draws more teenage male viewers than Monday Night Football or World Series baseball.
Is a very fond memory because wrestling really was huge mainstream at that time. From a pure marketability standpoint, the product they were putting on was awesome. It connected. From a moral standpoint, morals are morals, but it rubbed some people the wrong way.
One true thing about professional wrestling, millions of fans are pouring in. But this business has serious questions, some involving violence and sexually explicit content.
Promoters would have you believe that it's family entertainment. But if you've never been to a show or never seen one on TV, watch one. You're in for a shock.
As performers, you're just going for whatever the biggest reaction is. And you're seeing these things get bigger reactions than anything else. So you're going down that road of, I'm going to be edgy.
I got 2 words for you. Sucker.
It was a lot of fun and it was a lot of freedom. But there's a lot of stuff online that you can watch, where I go like, how did we ever get away with that stuff?
You can take your pick of either one of these holes.
Critics say the World Wrestling Federation blows away the envelope of good taste.
Perhaps no one has been more critical of McMahon than New York Post columnist Phil Mushnick.
They knew that they could get away with everything. Not anything, everything. And they pushed it. They pushed that for all it's worth. We're going to go low, and then we're going to go lower, and then we're going to go lower.
This was maybe a standard deviation beyond what we were doing before. But it was still family friendly. No one got killed.
they're having buried alive in casket matches on fucking Monday Night Raw and shit. Like,
no rape.
Come on out, you rapist!
No use of knives or guns or anything like that.
Stone Cold shows up at Brian Pillman's house. Brian Pillman is armed with a fucking gun, like ready for Stone Cold to come through the door.
Witness a recent simulated castration suit.
Did Vince McMahon forget about all this shit? Like,
so it's still family friendly. Maybe for more of an adult family.
Maybe for more of an adult family.
They were doing the double talk. They would say, we're not marketing to kids, when in fact their audience was kids. And so some people would go like, hey, you've got a responsibility to not be such a bad influence on kids. They go, oh, but we're not marketing to kids anymore. That's what we used to do. And it's like, all right, whatever.
I think it was primarily aimed at young males.
Action figures, dolls. These aren't being bought by and enjoyed by adults. These are for 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds.
Frankly, the Attitude Era, the kids embraced it.
Fuck you.
I mean, for me personally, I grew up during this entire generation of wrestling, okay? I got into wrestling before it was ever the fucking Ruthless Aggression era in WWE. I was watching pro wrestling before 2002. I was watching it pretty much during the entire Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars. That is when I became a pro wrestling fan. And then obviously I was watching a lot of the WWE or the WCW stuff as well at that time. I pretty much got into pro wrestling because of my older brother. He would do backyard wrestling, so that is why I also love things like ECW and the hardcore kind of style of wrestling. Um, but I got into pro wrestling way before there was ever a Brock Lesnar or a John Cena or fucking a Randy Orton. I was, these are the characters that I grew up on. Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Undertaker, Kane, Mankind, Mick Foley, Kurt Angle. We had so much. I mean, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart. I was watching Bret Hart and Owen Hart matches. I remember one of my favorite matches of them was the SummerSlam Steel Cage match. And then, of course, they had the match at WrestleMania 10. My brother would have VHS tapes, which I would watch, and I would constantly just teach myself things that I didn't know. I talked about in the one episode how when I was like a 3-4-year-old kid, I looked at it completely different than probably any other 3 or 4-year-old kid, especially in modern day times like today. Growing up, a lot of these wrestling fans, they have access to the WWE Network and an entire library of things on Peacock that they can just go back and watch. Back then, I had to be lucky enough to find this shit on VHS tapes, go to video stores, hope they had something with wrestling, and just teach myself about it. That's how I got all the knowledge that I know, and that's how I became such a big fan. But I was watching wrestling pretty much during this generation. I was born in 97. So obviously that is the start to the beginning of the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars. So that is pretty much all the stuff that I grew up watching.
They were seeing something maybe they weren't supposed to see. So the Attitude Era in many ways probably attracted kids. Would I have let my kids watch it? Yeah, I probably would have.
It's a monster, is really what it is. It's a nationwide monster. It's got to be stopped.
The principal is entitled to his opinion. I'm entitled to mine. We wholeheartedly would want parents and everyone to be able to exercise their freedom of choice. Damn it is America. Go live in your world. Don't like us. Click us off. Don't watch us.
Look, I was the one certainly leading the charge in that, don't tell us to raise your children. You need to raise them yourself. And if they're influenced by television, that's your fault. Now, having a daughter, there are times we probably could have been less objectionable towards our women.
It is time to stop your grinning and drop your linen.
We continue to consistently go over the line. In terms of taste, there were a lot of questionable things.
You look pretty damn good on your knees, John. It almost looks like a natural position.
It was, exploitive of women like you wouldn't believe, but that's what was selling. And the audience was guys, teenage guys seeing women like that. From a pure marketing standpoint, it was very, very successful.
The Attitude Era women weren't really considered wrestlers. Eye candy. That's kind of what they were at the time. Sable was the pioneer WWE diva, so to speak. She knew exactly what her role was.
Trish Stratus, obviously here taking a time to speak. Absolutely love Trish Stratus. You're bae, you're the queen, Trish. Obviously from Toronto, just up the road here from Buffalo. But one thing that I also wanted to add is I've always talked about how during this time especially, and even, a lot moving forward, like even when we get into like the 2000s, women's wrestling is still not very popular amongst the pro wrestling audience and just in WWE in general. I'll always say like Trish Stratus and Tori Wilson, the true pioneers kind of the women's revolution, if you want to call it. They were always trying to be pro wrestlers, but they really couldn't do much against the things that they were subjected to doing around WWE at this time. Obviously, it's unfortunate. Like I said, guys, I mean, I've even myself gone to events where they didn't even have women's wrestling matches. It was fucking lingerie contest and bra and panty shit. Fucking now Trish Stratus is here talking about Sable. Obviously, Sable is the wife of current pro wrestler Brock Lesnar.
people know her as like, Sexy Sable, but she was also athletically contributing to the show, which I think is overlooked at times because it wasn't normal, it wasn't acceptable, it wasn't what the women did. At the time, like the late 90s, you had Jerry Springer.
Just when you thought you'd seen it all, the bad get better.
You had train wreck television that was happening. Howard Stern was huge.
I want to bang Bonnie, Jill, and Brandy.
The Attitude Era definitely was a reflection of what was going on in the real world.
Society at that time was a lot sexier, and we were reflecting that in every way. Some of the things, bra and panty matches, I'm not sure that that would be suggested today. At that time, that was what was on television.
Vince McMahon is part of his time. The difference is that he's in a distinctive position where he reinforces those tendencies rather than challenging or changing or transforming them into something else.
We more or less followed what was going on in the entertainment business. A lot of times the highest quarter hour, the highest rating in that segment were women. Much higher than some of the great matches and things of that nature.
We felt like we needed to be edgy because that's what television was at that time.
And this is live TV, and there ain't a damn thing Vince can do about this.
We always want to serve our audience, so we did, and of course took it maybe a little too far in some cases.
Say how crazy it was. You can look back and announce because you should have never done that, or that was so inappropriate, or it was. And who's worse, the guy that did it or the people that loved it? I don't know.
Welcome to the War Zone, everybody. Jim Ross. I'm joined by James J. Cornette here at ringside, and the owner of the World Wrestling Federation is on his way.
Owen Hart, I'm ordering you to appear in this ring right now.
Yes, right there. He's coming. Are we going to see reporting for duty or reporting for a fight?
After the problems I had with Bret Hart, with Owen, I said, Owen, do you want to stay with us, or do you want to leave, with Bret? He said, well, I'd like to stay.
It's time for me to do what I have to do, and that is remain right here in the World Wrestling Federation.
When I went to WCW and Owen stayed, nothing was the same anymore. So he thought I was mad at him. If anything, I had great sympathy for him and felt badly that he was in the predicament that he was in. Owen had nothing to do with either me or Vince, but he was going to pay for it.
Now, obviously, Bret Hart here talking about his brother Owen. So after the fallout with the Montreal Screwjob, and Bret Hart decides to leave the company, he's going to go under contract for the rival brand, the rival company, WCW. Owen Hart decides to stay with the WWF. And I really think they should have treated Owen better. They really tried to push him to the next level as well, especially with all the talent that was around him. Owen Hart definitely deserved that. What he didn't deserve was receiving the punishment for what happened with Bret Hart and Vince McMahon. Obviously, because Owen Hart decides to stay with the company after his brother Bret leaves, Vince McMahon takes it as an opportunity to sort of punish Owen. They take away his whole character as Owen Hart, and they pretty much start marketing as another character. They pretty much give him the gimmick of, I believe it was the Blue Bomber, something like that. It was pretty much just a superhero gimmick, not a very good one, but it was completely separate from the Owen Hart that everybody knew and loved. And this would start to be the decline of Owen Hart. The WWF had gold on their hands with Owen Hart, and they did absolutely nothing with him after the Montreal Screwjob. Personally, because Vince McMahon still had issues with the Hart family and what happened with Bret in Montreal with the Screwjob. So he pretty much decided to kind of just take it out on Owen, and it's so unfortunate what happened to Owen Hart as well. if you go back, I mean, it's unfortunate what happened with both Brett and Owen. Now that we're having the chance to talk about it, but if you go back and you listen to interviews or just people talking about the situation that happened with Owen, he didn't have the right kind of gear. He didn't have the right kind of people around him to kind of say, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea and you shouldn't go fucking 50, 80 feet above the ring and try to fucking skydive from the rafters. It was just so unprofessional how the situation was handled. It's unfortunate to talk about it now because obviously it led to the death of one of the greatest pro wrestlers of all time, Owen Hart.
And they kind of humiliated his character as often as they could for quite a while to get at me.
The hypothesis that we would do something against Owen, because Brett left, only speaks to Brett's ego. Really, Brett? Why would we do that? We don't care about you. You left. We're trying to make Owen a star. What is that?
So they ended up doing a storyline with him where they said, you're going to be the Blue Blazer again.
It was the Blue Blazer, not the Blue Bomber. I think Blue Bomber is like a Hulk Hogan kind of superhero gimmick they try to do. But like I said, they stripped Owen of everything that the fans knew about him, such as with Owen Hart, and they pretty much made him the Blue Blazer character, which is, like I said, just a superhero and a bad gimmick at that, probably maybe even worse than the Hurricane. But the Blue Blazer did not get over with fans, and then obviously the last time that Owen Hart is even performing, it is one of the most unfortunate situations in pro wrestling history of all time.
And you're going to be this sort of clumsy old hero.
May 23rd, 99. Can you talk about that day?
How's Owen?
Let's take you now to an interview conducted earlier tonight. And we got big problems out here.
Well, Blue Blazer, you got a big match tonight going after the interview.
We were live in a pre-taped interview of Owen. We were going to drop Owen down, kind of like rappelling from the top of the ceiling.
Owen was to fly, so to speak, as we've done before, from the rafters of the building.
I'm watching the pre-tape interview, and I hear someone say, Owen's in the ring. What the hell is he doing?
I was on a flight, and I could feel something overcame me. And I can remember when something bad happened. I can feel it.
Ladies and gentlemen, when you're doing live television, a lot of things can happen.
And people in the audience, I mean, they're showing the footage here from Over the Edge, which is the night that Owen Hart passed away. They were going to do an Intercontinental Championship match at Over the Edge. It was going to be the Godfather, the champion at the time, defending the title against Owen Hart, the Blue Blazer. And I mean, you can even see here, just from the reactions in the audience, people are in fucking shock and awe. They're absolutely stunned at what has just occurred live in this arena. Like I said, it was completely done unprofessionally from the WWE standards. There definitely should have been more care and more concern for what they were doing to Owen Hart. I mean, if you're going to put somebody fucking 50, 80 feet above the ring and expect them to do some kind of like movie superhero stunt, you have to take everything into consideration and you have to show more protection for your athletes. And that was not done that night.
And sometimes they are not good. The Blue Blazer, as we know, as Owen Hart, was going to make a very spectacular superhero-like entrance from the rafters, and something went terribly wrong here.
Thank God for the audience that we were in a blackout, so they didn't really see it. Thank God. When the lights came up, they saw Owen in the ring and medical personnel were working on him. We wondered whether or not could Owen be alive. Surely he could be.
Jerry Lawler back joining me here. King, I was reiterating the fans, this is not part of the show. We're here to entertain and have fun, but this is neither.
No, it doesn't look good at all. Jerry Lawler came back and says, Bruce, I think he's dead. But say that. The policeman who was next to me pulled me off to the side, and Vince was there, and he let us know. They pronounced him dead.
I had the unfortunate responsibility to let everyone know that Owen Hart has died.
Now, obviously, because of what happened to Owen Hart, his wife has been very vocal about the situation that happened. She does not have any support for the WWE. Owen Hart will never be a part of the Hall of Fame in WWE because his family does not want him to go out remembered like that. Like I said, just the overall concern and protection was not there for Owen Hart that night. Vince McMahon said during Owen Hart's fall that they were in a blackout, so it would kind of look like it is now in my room, where you don't really have much light surrounding the ring. Owen Hart was obviously probably up in the rafters getting prepared to descend down and make the grand entrance from the ceiling, but that is, of course, not what happened. So while they were in blackout, there's not anything going on around this time. Maybe some crew members working around the ring, tightening the ropes and whatnot, getting ready for the next match. But even for the fans, it was a surprise, because once the lights came on, Owen Hart is just laying there in the middle of the ring and he ain't fucking moving. And now you have all these medical personnel around him checking on him, and he's still not really doing anything. To them, they might have probably thought it was a part of the show at that time. But, I mean, you could, from the interviews that I've heard and that I've watched, they always talk about how when Owen Hart hit the ring, it just created this fucking impact that was just like anything you've ever heard before. I mean, I'm pretty sure they said that Owen Hart landed directly in the corner of the ring on the ring post, and it killed him immediately. So now, they do break the news to the audience, I'm sure, at the arena, and especially those watching on TV, that Owen Hart has passed away. Owen Hart's family has supported All Elite Wrestling in AEW. They do the Owen Hart tournament all the time in AEW. But Owen Hart's family does not support WWE, especially after the events of his death.
Owen Hart has tragically died from an accident here tonight.
The decision that basically I had to make was whether or not this show goes on. The live audience didn't really see what happened. Had they seen, there's no question about it, you have to shut the show down.
We didn't announce to the live house because we just didn't think that was the right thing to do.
Those people came to see a show. They didn't come to see somebody die.
So it was never announced to the live audience what had happened to Owen Hart. They didn't have any fucking idea that Owen Hart passed away, probably until they got home and was seeing all these news reports and stuff about it. But Vince McMahon is saying here it was his call if the show would continue after that. Obviously, they still had a wrestling show. They still had a pay-per-view to do. And Vince McMahon is saying, listen, the fans, they didn't pay money to see somebody die or hear that somebody died. They came to see wrestling.
And me as a businessman, it's like, well, okay, let's continue on. Let's continue the show.
First off, Owen Hart, I'm praying for you, buddy. Val Venus, you've been chasing these puppies around. Well, pal, I got news for you. Those are my puppies, and they always have been.
I mean, you can see people, they're out here cutting promos at Over the Edge, and they are trying to fucking hold back tears. They're trying to fight themselves and hold back the tears because they know what happened. Maybe it wasn't announced to the live audience, but everybody backstage, everybody that's working there that night, they knew that Owen hurt himself very badly. And it cost him his life. But you can see, even when they're cutting promos, they're fucking fighting to hold back the tears.
Never should have continued the show. One of your buddies just died, like literally just died in this ring, and his blood is right there, and we're going out there wrestling, trying to perform for this audience that doesn't even know it, while we're brokenhearted.
I mean, you can literally see Owen Hart's blood splattered in the ring, you know, and they're still carrying on with this live show, obviously a pay-per-view at the time. It was Vince McMahon's call if the show was to go on or not. And it's like I said, these are the reasons why Owen Hart's family does not want Owen Hart in the WWE Hall of Fame. They do not support the WWE. I know Bret Hart has obviously came back and he's kind of tried to be on better terms with them and stuff, obviously. But this night specifically, when Owen Hart passes away, it is just fucking tragic, okay? And to go back and obviously see some of the footage, I even remember, I think my brother actually had a VHS tape of Over the Edge, or maybe I rented it from a video store, but it is absolutely fucking gruesome just to hear, you know, they didn't even clean Owen's blood off of the canvas. They didn't even clean Owen's blood off of the mat, and they just continued on with the show, sent the wrestlers out there like it was a normal night, and they're performing while one of their brother's blood is literally still in the corner of the ring. It's just a fucking awful story to have to talk about.
What you do, your business is entertainment, and you allowed the entertainment to continue with the blood of Owen Hart still in the ring. I'm not sure that's not disrespectful to Owen Hart.
So there are a lot of negative comments, actually, as to whether or not this show should have continued.
I actually know firsthand from the wrestlers involved that they wheeled my dead brother right past all the wrestlers, and actually pushed wrestlers out the door and said, go, 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 you're on.
Naturally, Brent's going to feel like, like a brother should. He had every right to say anything negative about our company.
I think if Vince McMahon had dropped Shane McMahon from the ceiling and he splatted on the mat, I don't think he would have scraped him off the mat and sent the next match out.
Had it been me, not just my son, had it been me who was splattered on the mat, as Brent said, I would want the show to go on. So get me out of there, and let the show go on. I'd do it with me, and to this day I would.
It really was very hard for me to take at that time, because I kept thinking that maybe they murdered him to get back to me.
At 10:01 a.m. this morning, my legal counsel filed a wrongful death lawsuit for my husband's death.
In terms of Owen, we settled a lawsuit basically with his wife. And then we find out, which we thought, it wasn't our fault. Unfortunately, the apparatus they were using was defective, and the manufacturer knew it was defective. And then we sued the manufacturer.
They investigated Vince and WWF for a long time.
It's 78 feet. That was the height. It's basically an 80-foot drop from where Owen Hart was at the top of the ceiling in the arena down to the fucking ring. It's like 80 feet, like I said, guys. As soon as he fucking hit the ring, he's dead. As soon as he gets impact, he's dead. That's 80 feet falling from the ceiling. They knew his harness was defective. The company that sold it to the WWF knew that it was defective, that it wasn't in proper working conditions. And now they're talking about the lawsuit that Vince McMahon had to fight and the WWF had to fight for a long time in contrary to the lawsuit from the Hart family.
A policeman from Kansas City's police department called me, and he goes, I promised you I'd call you, and I'm calling to tell you that there's nothing criminal here, that this was just a horrible accident. And for me, when I heard that, it was like, okay, it's an accident. I think in my heart of hearts, forgave Vince. I had plenty of reasons to have issues with Vince, but they were on a professional level and not on a personal level.
Do you think there will be any changes in wrestling because of this?
I certainly hope so. We're not so dead against the wrestling business. What we are disappointed in is in the sort of the drastic turn that wrestling's taken in the last 2 years. And it's a shame that, the fans have sort of become wild dogs that sort of want more and more and more all the time.
At that point, we're all pushing the envelope. Everybody's willing to do whatever are saying that I don't want to do that or that's too dangerous. But at some point, enough is enough.
We want to give our fans what they want. We're probably pushing as far as we can right now, but who knows as it relates to the future.
In 2000, Martha Hart settled her lawsuit against WWE. In 2003, WWE settled its lawsuit against the manufacturer of the harness used in Owen's stunt. So Martha Hart sued WWE for the death of Owen Hart, and WWE sued the manufacturer who made the device that was put on Owen Hart the night of his death. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is episode 4 of the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix. Only 2 episodes left,
Jane
5 and 6.
had an idea that he...
Let me close out of this so that way we don't get any spoilers ahead. But thank you so much for watching with me. Thank you so much for being here and for your support. Recently, we hit 1,000 followers on Twitter, or X as the kids call it nowadays. Currently 1:04 a.m. It is officially October here, all around the world and in Buffalo, New York. So spooky season is upon us. Libra season is here. Your boy's got a birthday on October 18th coming up. Going to be 27 years old. So thank you once again for watching with me. I'm not exactly sure the next time I will be streaming, most likely on Thursday, coming up in just a couple days. But we will definitely be back again, and we have 2 more episodes to watch here on the Mr. McMahon documentary series here on Netflix. And since we are officially in October and Halloween season, we will also be starting our Halloween specials of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob coming up very soon. So thank you once again for being here with me tonight. I appreciate your viewership so much, all your support. It means everything to me. Until next time, peace, God.